Sharbat with Shivram, take 1.
Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Sharbat with Shivram. Today's guests need no introduction. Their work in their respective fields speak for themselves. Our first guest tonight is someone who's revolutionized the way Indian Railways works. His work has changed the face of the world's largest railway network. And our second guest is an IAS officer with a degree in economics. His work in the Sales Tax Commission is regarded nothing short of a miracle. So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. M.S. Gujral and Mr. Sudhir Kumar. And in the audience tonight, we have Mr. Hadley and Ms. Kamal, who are both MBA students from the Indian School of Business. So to start off with, let's go to Mr. M.S. Gujral. So Mr. Gujral, could you please tell us something about your journey with the Indian Railways?
Yeah, Mr. Shivram, I still have a clear memory of that day. It was around 10 a.m. in the morning. I was having a cup of coffee with my breakfast, and during our times we used to have coffees rather than sharbats.
Sure.
And then I got a call from the office of Mrs. Gandhi with this assignment, the Indian Railways. Coming from an army background, what I saw at Indian Railways was a total chaos. And turning it around during my tenure was the most memorable experience of my life, and I cherish it throughout my life.
Sure.
Dun 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 dun.
So magically our next guest is here. So let's now go to Mr. Sudhir Kumar and ask him about his journey. Mr. Sudhir Kumar, please, our viewers are waiting.
So Shivram, my story is very different from Mr. Gujral here. I come from a business family, and I opted against joining my father's business. I thought I'd serve my country, and I went and did IAS. After my IAS, I was posted in Bihar, and there I struggled a lot initially. So to be really honest, I was shifted from one department to another during my initial years. But I thought that experience of struggling really taught me how to succeed during my later years, when I was able to do something valuable for the people of Bihar.
So that's quite a story, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you.
So gentlemen, specifically, what were the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them? Mr. Gujral, first. You.
So I actually kept it simple. I followed the principles that we have in army, where you have discipline and you all follow orders from your seniors. Whereas what I saw in the Indian Railways was the exact opposite. The union had become too strong, and the management had no power at all. So to begin with, what I did was, one of the first things that I did was identify the Srini triangle, that is the area in the east which was the most critical for our operations at that time, and started a freight train from that area, irrespective of whether there is a strike going on or not. So what that helped us achieve was it demoralized the union, and it gave them a signal that even without them the business would be as usual. I think that helped us in the long run.
Sure. Quite interesting. Mr. Kumar, if you could go next. What kind of challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
So as the Sales Tax Commissioner, the biggest challenge was the low tax revenues that we were facing in Bihar. What I did was, I took two steps. First, I identified the 30 largest companies that were present in Bihar.
Sure.
The ones they were evading taxes. After I had done that, I studied the tax code and understood the loopholes that were present there. And after I understood the loopholes, I was able to plug them and ensure that the tax revenues increased substantially. Over a period of 2 years, I was able to quadruple it.
Okay, that's a very commendable approach, Mr. Kumar. So moving on, It appears as though both of you have taken some really radical steps at your respective workplaces. So could you briefly touch upon that?
Yeah, firing 900 people in a matter of 72 hours. It as radical as it gets.
Wow.
It is done for the first time in the history of Indian Railways, and I think the idea was to send a strong signal and communicate to the union that the power is still with the management, and it's not like they can do anything and get away with it. The other thing, you have B school students as your audience, and I'm sure they would have learned in their change management course that the idea is to institutionalize the change and not just leave it at some one or two short-term wins. So I think that was the idea of adding the employee provisions and making it long-term and giving the senior management this power in the long term and not in the short term.
Right. That's quite courageous, I have to admit. Coming to you next, Mr. Kumar, what kind of radical steps did you have to undertake?
So I had to deal with a group of dishonest employees in my own department. So there were tax fraud cases against the employees who worked in the tax department in Bihar. I had to dismiss all the cases that were pending against them in order to motivate them to work towards the common goal that we had set at increasing the tax revenues. So what I would like to give as a takeaway to the students present here is that the motivation of the group of people present in your team is very important, and when you are trying to change something, you have to let go of certain things. So that would be my message to you.
Sure. I'm sure our students out here are going to appreciate the nuggets of wisdom you guys are passing on.
Thank you.
So viewers, that brings us to the end of a very insightful interview. Can we please have a round of applause for our... Thank you. So as a concluding segment, we have both ISB students who've been watching our show, who now want to share their learnings with us. So, ISB students, if you can please show up. Kamal and Hadley. So Kamal, I'd request you to go first. You've been entertaining the class with your insightful CP for a long time. Your feedback about the interview.
So I've learned that when you're doing a change in the organization, you better stick to it. Till the end, it becomes part of the culture. We learn in class, anchored in the culture. Thank you.
Sure, that was sweet and brief. Over to you, Mr. Hadley.
So my biggest learning is every situation demands a different approach. We saw that Mr. Gujral had a very aggressive approach, whereas Mr. Kumar, he adjusted to the situation. So my biggest learning is that adjust to the situation and bring the change and institutionalize it as much as possible.
Perfect. So thanks to the two of you. We are glad that the show has been able to benefit someone out there. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Sharbat with Shivram. Oh. So to start off with, I'm going to go to Mr. Gujral. Oh no, next. Oh, sorry. Go.
Done. We are touches. Done.